So I've recently uploaded what is in my top 10 list for the worst movies of the last decade. So now I will discuss what I consider to be the top 10 best movies of the 2010s. And all of these movies have been critically acclaimed for one reason or another. But I will go into detail about what I personally thought was great about them. Each entry on this list has really enlightened me to just how diverse and complex movies can be. And so starting off with my number 10. At number 10, I have Sorry to Bother You, which was directed by Boots Riley on a budget of $3 million. Now, this movie largely is about capitalism, but it presents itself as a comedy, and it's extremely effective because the writing is just that strong. I found myself laughing throughout the vast majority of this movie's runtime. And most modern Hollywood comedies are just not good. They're not funny, they're not inventive, they're not creative. But this is one of the few where it's actually really effective. And most of the comedy presents itself through the dialogue, although the actors also elevate the material in really intriguing ways. Lakeith Stanfield really steals the show in this. This movie would not have worked without him. He really does a good job of portraying someone who is from a lower class on the financial spectrum, and he moves up the ladder, but at the same time he has to deal with selling his soul to get what he wants out of life. And seeing his journey in this movie was really tragic in a way. But at the same time, I had a good ride watching this movie, and I consider it to be the best comedy that's been released in the past decade. And that's why it's on my list. At number 9, I have The Avengers, Infinity War, and Endgame on my list. Both of them. Because they're meant to go together. They're meant to be taken as one complete whole. Now, I was trying to find reasons not to include either one of these movies up on my list. Because they are really just a typical superhero action blockbuster film. But it's the best of its kind in that regard. And I can't ignore the fact that Marvel did really achieve something special with these two movies here in particular. By capitalizing on 10 years of storytelling and bringing together this large ensemble cast, Marvel was really able to bring a comic book to life in a way that really hasn't been done before. Not to mention the high production quality, the quality of the CGI, is very impressive in both of these movies. The acting and the direction is top tier quality. And even the story itself is interesting because of Thanos. They really got Thanos right in these movies. And it's because of those reasons that these movies have gone on to pretty much destroy anything else that's gone up against them in the box office during their theatrical run. And these two movies were a phenomenon. They were nothing short of grand spectacle that everyone went to go see. And it's very unclear right now when is the next time we're going to see something like this, if at all ever again. Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame are both technical achievements, but they're also achievements in storytelling over the time period of 10 years. That's something I can't ignore. And that's why both of these movies have made it into my top 10. At number 8, I have Birdman, also known as The Unexpected Virtue of Ignorance. So this movie is really something that has stood the test of time since its release back in 2014, I believe is when this came out. And this movie is about a former actor who is trying to shake loose his superhero persona that he became famous for playing, and he's trying to create this Broadway play, and basically liven up his career, which has become stagnant. Now, he has all these real life problems, which include his girlfriend, his ex-wife, his daughter, and he has to deal with an uncontrollable actor, played by Edward Norton, who creates issues for the play that he's trying to create. And the movie has some really important themes but it mainly deals with the fact that at some point in life, we have to come to grip with the fact that we're not special, and the world really doesn't care if we exist or not. It's a very important universal theme that this movie tries to tackle, and it succeeds gracefully, simply because of the way it's written. But also, from a filmmaking perspective, the movie is just gorgeous. The cinematography is just flawless. It's a very beautiful film to look at, and the direction is stellar as well. There's a lot of tracking shots that are in the movie, but it's all one take, and it's not something that's easy to pull off. But what really elevated this for me was the Birdman character itself, which acts as this voice inside the head of the main character, of Michael Keaton's character. And it's those moments in the film that really show how damaged this character really is. Birdman isn't just a character that he played for a number of years. This is something that's become a persona inside his mind. And so you can understand why he wants to make this play and break free of that persona. It's some really good storytelling, some of the best that I've seen all decade, and that's why it's on my list. And number 7 is Parasite, directed by Bong Joon-ho. And this movie is about a poor family who invades the home of a rich, wealthy family with an elaborate scheme as they pretend to be people that they're not in order to reap the benefits of the family's wealth. But as they soon learn later in the movie, there are consequences for their actions, and consequences of the permanent kind. Parasite is a very unique film. It's not something I've really ever seen before. And the fact that it's a foreign film makes it even more enthralling because it presents a different world than what I'm used to seeing. The cast does an excellent job in this, and the movie does a good job of showing both sides of the spectrum, the rich side and the poor side. And you can understand why the family is doing what they're doing. And that's what makes it even more tragic what happens towards the end of the movie, when everything starts to fall apart and their plan doesn't really turn out the way that they had wanted it to. And this movie arguably has some of the best cinematography I've ever seen in a movie. The cinematography is just stunning in this. It's a dark film, but the colors aren't like washed out. The movie is very vibrant, and there's a lot of personality on the screen as well as the set design. And that becomes a big character in the movie itself. But quite simply, this is one of the best scripts that I've seen from any movie I've seen over the last 10 years. This director is very talented, and I'm glad that this movie is getting the recognition that it deserves. Because quite simply, we just don't see too many movies that are of this caliber. And hopefully Parasite will change that for films coming in the future. At number 6, I have Logan, which was directed by James Mangold. And this movie is set in the X-Men film franchise, the Fox X-Men film franchise, towards the end of the timeline for those series of movies. And it presents a story in which the X-Men have all died, they're all gone, and the only one that's really left is Wolverine. And this is set during a time in which mutants are still being hunted down and eliminated. It's very loosely based off of the comic book of the same name, and it takes strides to go out of its way to do its own thing, which is part of what's good about it. But more so than not, this movie really proved that you can take a comic book character and focus more on the mythology of the character and what drives the character as far as his or her actions and what they're ultimately trying to achieve, instead of focusing on action sequences and over-glorified CGI. And it also proved that you can do this and target it towards an adult audience. And I've read articles where James Mangold has spoken about what it took to get the movie made. It wasn't easy pitching something like this because he had to explain to film executives that they wouldn't be able to profit off of the merchandise for the movie because it's rated R. He was trying to make something that was for adults rather than something that is meant for children or teenagers. But by the movie being rated R, they really showcased Wolverine the way he's really meant to be shown. And they did the character justice in a way that the previous X-Men movies have never done. And the end of the movie is just the perfect send-off for Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. You know, he played the character for 17 years, leading up to this big conclusion. And I understand why he wanted to walk away from the character after this. The movie just has the perfect conclusion for this character. And the movie has one of the best endings that I've seen all decade. And that's a big part of why it's on my list. Logan is a fantastic comic book film, but more so than that, it's a movie that is very mature and doesn't shy away from serious subject matter to emphasize more on its comic book nature. And it's really the first of its kind, and my list would be incomplete without it. At number 5, I have Whiplash, which was directed by Damien Chazelle. And this movie is about a young jazz student, a drummer, who wants to be among the elite in his music class. And so his music teacher, played by J.K. Simmons, moves him to the top ensemble, the elite jazz performance group. And from that point, the movie shows the teacher pushing this student to push past his limits. And this movie, similar to another film that came out this decade, known as Black Swan, is about a dedicated artist who pushes themselves to the point of obsession and insanity to perfect their craft. And as someone who plays a musical instrument and has done something similar to this, where I would sit for hours playing the same passage over and over again, trying to get it absolutely perfect, I understood what this character went through and the passion and the ambition that drove him in this movie. Seeing him fail over and over again was frustrating, but towards the end of the movie, when you see him finally push past his limits, it's a revelation that's very powerful, very emotional, and moving. The teaching methods that J.K. Simmons' character employs in this movie, it's something that any teacher in real life can get in serious trouble for, because he proceeds to use vulgar language, profanity, expletives of the extreme kind, and he taunts the students and he'll throw things at them that can cause serious physical harm. But it's his pathology that really makes him an unlikable person, but someone who really does care to push his students in ways that they haven't been pushed before, because he knows that's the only way they're ever going to get what they want. So you're dealing with two incredibly well-written characters in this movie, both of which are entirely different from one another. But you're also dealing with a theme that anyone who's ever tried to achieve perfection in anything can relate to. And the question of, is it really worth it, comes into play at several points throughout the movie. But the main theme of the movie is extremely powerful. If you really want something in life, sometimes you're going to have to shed some blood, sweat, and tears to get it. And you may not make it, but if you achieve your goal, then the hard work pays off and you can be proud of your accomplishment. And that's an important theme that I haven't seen from any other movie this past decade. At number 4, I have Joker, which was directed by Todd Phillips. And this movie is very important because it showcases a character that's been beaten down, who is mentally unstable, and tries to succeed and make a living for himself doing what he loves. But he starts to experience a lot of failure. He confides in people that he wants to trust, and they let him down. And the reality of the world really starts to get to this guy, and he really doesn't fit in with the rest of society. And he soon starts to realize that he's more comfortable by not adhering to the rules that society has set for everyone. And the movie is just this big transformation into a character that has no empathy. The movie really is a tragedy on an epic scale, but it's also a comic book movie that showcases the origin story of one of the greatest comic book villains of all time, the Joker. And Todd Phillips was able to weave together a narrative that actually makes sense for the character. The mythology of the Joker has always been clouded in obscurity, but this movie really tells a new kind of tale for the character that actually could end up being canon. And Joaquin Phoenix just knocked it out of the park in this. This is another movie where if the main actor was poorly cast, the movie itself would not have worked. But it seems that this role was written specifically for Joaquin Phoenix, which Todd Phillips has mentioned in interviews. Joaquin Phoenix is the actor he had in mind when he wrote Joker, and it shows in the movie itself. And this is one of those movies where the success of the film really is due to the high level of quality itself. The movie doesn't focus on action or CGI. This is another one of those comic book films that focuses solely on character development and plot progression. Movies like this is extremely rare, and the Joker has never really been fleshed out in this manner before. And that's what made this extremely intriguing. And I'm interested to see how well this movie's going to do at the Academy Awards this year. It has 11 nominations, and it deserves every single one of them. I truly believe that this movie deserves to win Best Picture, even over Parasite. And my list would be incomplete without this movie on it. It's a fantastic, well-made, beautiful film that just happens to be a tragedy. My number 3 choice is Gone Girl, directed by one of my all-time favorite movie directors, David Fincher. And this movie is about a couple that has a good public image, but when the glamorous wife goes missing, the husband becomes a prime suspect in the investigation, and it becomes a media frenzy. And later in the movie, we learn that the wife has staged the entire disappearance due to her feeling unappreciated. And so this movie is great for several different reasons. For one, it's just a good story about marriage and relationships. The behavior of men and women is explored in this movie in intricate detail. The acting is top notch, especially from Rosamund Pike, who plays the wife in this movie. And you even get, some good unexpected performances, such as Tyler Perry, which is a great example. And the movie really showcases marriage in a way that really has been unexplored until this movie came out. The husband in this movie, he's nothing short of an asshole. He pretty much treats his wife as a slave, as a sex object. And, he goes around cheating on her with, young college girls, and he really doesn't seem to appreciate his marriage at all. His relationship pretty much means nothing. And that's what pushes the wife to do what she does in this movie. And by the end of the film, the wife has orchestrated this plot, this scheme, so well that she has more control over the husband than she did at the beginning of the film, because at the beginning of the film, she had no power at all. But due to her being able to manipulate the police and manipulate the law, manipulate the media, and tarnish the image of her husband, she becomes the more dominant participant in the marriage. And it's very fascinating to witness this unfold throughout the course of the entire thing. And of course, from a filmmaking perspective, this is great as well. Fantastic direction, excellent cinematography, and it has some really good thriller elements as well. The movie really is more of a character study on marriage and relationships than it is anything else. But it's also a fascinating tale about loyalty and how important that's a determining factor when it comes to interpersonal relationships. and it's absolutely one of the best films that's been released over the past 10 years. My number 2 pick is Get Out, directed by Jordan Peele. And this movie is about an interracial couple who take some time out to go see the parents of the female in the relationship. And the boyfriend soon starts to realize that something is very off with the family, who seems to be agitated at the fact that he's African American. And this movie really presents itself as a comedy slash horror film. There's definitely some comedic elements in the film, but the horror elements that are there are also strong. The dialogue in the film is just flawless. Everything that's in the script is there to push the story forward, and there's a lot of unexpected turns and twists in the movie. There's some really disturbing but effective horror imagery in the film, and Daniel Kaluuya, he steals the show in this movie. His performance comes off as subtle in certain areas, but simultaneously he's able to capture the higher emotional beats of the film. And the movie is basically a social commentary on not just relationships, but how people view different ethnicities when it comes to interpersonal relationships. Interracial relationships are more popular now than they ever have been, but in some circles they're still considered to be taboo. And most ethnic groups will only date within their specific ethnic class. Of course, when it comes to African Americans, Black people tend to date more outside their race, more so than any other group of people. And this movie thoroughly explores the relationship between a white female and a Black male. And Jordan Peele could have simply had this movie be just a straight social commentary, but he was able to turn it into something that's highly entertaining with the thriller and the horror elements that's in the film. And that's a big part of what elevates Get Out. But what's truly great about it is the social commentary, and the fact that it's a horror film makes it stand out more among its contemporaries. You do have those out there that didn't like this movie because of the social commentary, but the fact that the movie was able to generate such strong opinions on both sides of the argument just goes to show how well made the movie actually is. And the fact that the movie does have something to say means that the movie is doing what it's supposed to be doing. And Get Out is absolutely one of the best films that's been released over the last decade. So finally, I'm down to my number 1 pick, the best movie of the 2010s. And that movie is...
Excuse me, sir. I'm looking for a job. I'm a hard worker. I set high goals. My motto is, if you want to win the lottery, you have to make the money to buy a ticket. So what do you say? I could start tomorrow, or even why not tonight?
No, I'm not hiring.
Nightcrawler is my number 1 best film of the 2010s. So this movie was directed by Dan Gilroy. It's a neo-noir film that's a drama and a thriller. And it's about a criminal who commits petty crimes such as scavenging, petty theft, in order to survive. And he starts a new career as a cameraman who uses a police scanner. And he searches the city of Los Angeles in order to find gruesome crimes and capture footage of the aftermath. He catches the attention of a news director who wants to raise the ratings on her station. And so throughout the movie, he goes to greater lengths to capture that one shot that'll make his career blow up. And so you're dealing with a very unstable character in this movie. This guy doesn't have any empathy for anything that happens at these crime scenes, any of the victims. To him, these people are just potential gain for him in his career. And some of the things that he does is very disturbing on a deep personal level, and where a normal person would take a look at some of these crime scenes, they would shy away from the tragic and violent nature of them Instead, this guy doesn't seem to be bothered about anything that's happened at these crime scenes. And you soon start to realize later in the movie that this character has some psychopathic personality traits. And Jake Gyllenhaal plays this character with confidence and grace. On the surface, he appears to be a normal guy, but you can tell that there's something very broken underneath. And this character lacks empathy, and he doesn't care about anyone but himself. He's a very selfish human being. And the movie has something to say about how the media really reacts behind the scenes when it comes to tragedies that happen in the real world. For news stations and Nightcrawlers that do this sort of thing in real life, any disturbing real life tragedy, even if it involves someone being killed, someone being shot, someone being stabbed, to them, it just means more ratings. And more ratings means more money. And so the movie can be looked at from that angle. But also as a drama film, as a thriller film, it's extremely effective due to its dark imagery. Most of the movie takes place at night. And because the main character is a cameraman, there's a lot of different tracking shots throughout the movie. And so you get almost like a guerrilla style of direction with the camera work. And it's very effective because it feels like you're actually there. And I haven't seen a movie that's like this before. And I haven't seen anything that's like it since. A movie that takes place almost entirely at night is very uncommon. You don't see it too often, but when you do, if the story is good enough, those can be some of the best movies that you can see simply because of the way they're shot. This movie just happens to have a very damaged and mentally unstable individual that you follow throughout the course of the film's narrative. And that's what makes the movie really interesting. But the reason it's my number one is due to the fact of how the movie ends. Throughout the movie, you really want this guy to fail. But at the same time, you want him to succeed because he's so driven and he has that ambition. He's just going about it in the worst way possible by exploiting the tragic nature of what other people have gone through. And by the end of the movie, it ends in a very neutral place because at the end of this character's journey, he's really learned how to achieve success, but he hasn't learned anything about how to deal with other people. And so the character grows greatly in one area, but he's still stagnant. And in fact, he regresses in another area. So he's very unbalanced by the end of the movie. And I haven't seen a character that's written anywhere near this well over the past decade. And that's why Nightcrawler is my number one film, my number one best movie of the 2010s. And so that concludes my list. And now that I'm done with these top 10 videos, I will move on to something else. I will upload more content very soon.